which will see the supply of new coins cut in half. This also coincides with the Canopy network upgrade, which will create a new development fund for people to build on top of Zcash. I'm sure we'll cover this and a lot more during the conversation. So make sure you leave your questions in the chat and we'll leave time to get to them at the end. And with that, I'll turn it over to Brad and Marshall.
Hey, everybody. Thanks, Andre.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for having us on this show. It's really great, and very excited to talk about Zcash today and the future of anonymous, fully fungible digital cash.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that kind of sums it up, right? So, you know, it's funny, like Zcash is one of those projects that's had, you know, a lot of excitement around it and a lot of very methodical ongoing development. And, you know, some of the things that we're working on, I'm excited to talk about. So I don't know, where do you want to start?
Yeah, so tell me, I guess, you know, I was one of the early Zcash people. I was at the launch in 2016. I forgot the name of the co-working space in San Francisco, but it was really cool listening to Zuko and the team talk about how they had designed Zcash with ZK snarks, and it's to this day, you know, I will say that I've never seen a rival. I've never seen anything that's come close to the level of cryptography and I guess anonymity that Zcash can provide. And it's not just, and I think something that's important for our viewers to know, it's not just about anonymous transactions, but it's about financial freedom. It's about privacy. It's about, you know, I think that sometimes these topics get mixed up and people think, you know, anonymous is bad, but anonymous is good because it gives us privacy. We don't have the ability to see into each other's bank accounts. So why should we have the ability to see into each other's cryptocurrency accounts? And that was the way it started with Bitcoin and UTXO. But, you know, maybe Brad, you could touch on kind of the ethos of Zcash and why you guys do what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, our tagline as Electric Coin Company, one of the core developers of Zcash, is to empower everyone with economic freedom. And that sounds like an incredibly ambitious goal, and it absolutely is. But if you really think about it, there's a lot of like fundamental foundational pieces that are needed. You know, I think a lot of times people throw around terms like privacy coins and like anonymity, and it becomes pigeonholed in those areas. And that's really not the core focus of Zcash, right? You know, our goal is to create a future money, right? Future money that's native to the internet. And there's core things that are necessary for that. You touched on fungibility. You know, if maybe some people don't understand what that means, like, you know, fungibility is like two different objects, but they're indistinguishable from each other. So like one Zcash is one Zcash, you know, and some other cryptos, you know, specifically we can talk Bitcoin, you know, it's phenomenal. It's got incredible technology behind it. It was an incredible breakthrough, but, you know, everybody knows Bitcoin's not really fungible. You know, there's tagged coins that move around. And that makes it really hard for values to be set equally across the board, right? So there's that part of privacy. The other part of privacy is just user safety. You know, you know, we have this tagline where it's like, you know, privacy is singing in the shower, right? If everybody was listening to you sing in the shower, right? Like it's not necessarily a dark, nefarious thing, right? We have a lot of privacy in a lot of parts of our lives, and it's just one of the things that allows us to be ourselves. So it's really important in the concept of cash that we can use our cash in ways that we're comfortable with, and that it's not being tagged, followed, tracked, both for user safety and for user confidence. So yeah, I mean, it's been an incredible ride so far, and you know, there's a lot to come.
That's amazing. You know, it's really interesting because when as a neobank and a payment processor, we interact with large banks, we interact with card companies, and something we come across often, you know, in the card payment processing world is the enemy is cash. We're trying to replace cash, and it's funny because, well, it's not funny. I mean, it's awesome when you say that. You know, Zcash's mission is to empower global economic freedom, financial access, right? It's very much Metal's vision as well, and it's one of the reasons we aligned and partnered and added Zcash to the app. And you know, we're here today and talking about it, and we want to educate people about this technology because if you look back to kind of the dawn of e-commerce and online payments, that was started with a very simple kind of methodology with the credit card bin and all of this stuff. And that was not, if you think about it, from the very beginning of payments, what do? we took a card, we put a piece of carbon copy over it. We literally copied. It was like the definition of not private, right? It was sitting in a stack of pieces of paper. Now we have this thing called PCI compliance, right? But to go even a step further, what's really cool that we're here today to talk about is the future of payments and Web3, privacy, and kind of where the future of digital cash is going. And I think it's another thing I want to point out to our listeners is that private does not, anonymous do not necessarily mean nefarious. And I think that because I've been involved in cryptocurrency for a long time, in 2012 and 2013, people said, oh, it's just a hobby. End of 2013, I think it was around that time, the Silk Road and some of this negative news, Mt. Gox and things had come out. And so people took this, oh, Bitcoin is bad, crypto is bad. And then they said, oh, it's anonymous. Well, it turns out it's not anonymous. It's pseudo-anonymous, right? But then the next part of the conversation comes up, which is how do we have how do we give better user safety, better user privacy? And I think it's really important because the future is a world in which there will be no debit or credit card numbers. In fact, there will be no looking up people's information in public addresses on UTXO chains, even because you may have seen recently Bitcoin added the new, I think it's BIP 155 for Tor v3 addresses. Right. So really, this is privacy on the blockchain is like the next frontier, and Zcash is without a doubt, I would say, the leader. And so very, very cool. And I think that the last thing I want to say is that Zcash has done some incredible work in the regulatory sphere and the political sphere. And for those that were thinking, well, that's not the intention of anonymity. Well, the really big purpose, the really big problem you guys are solving is user safety, fungibility, anonymity. Right. What is the fact? It's like every dollar bill in the United States has like some trace of cocaine on it or something. Like if you were to say that if you were to say that every bill that had that on it was not spendable, then that's in a way that's kind of like where some blockchain assets are today. They're tainted, the coins have been tainted and things like that. And
right, exactly.
So, and that's to no fault of the user's own. It's just because there's a limited supply, there's different economics and things like that. And so you guys have done incredible work with NYDFS. You've done, I've seen a lot of different work you guys have done on the regulatory front. And it's interesting to note that you guys are also travel rule compliant.
Yeah, absolutely. I can jump into that a little bit. So first off, I'll plug a live stream that happened yesterday with our head of compliance, Jack Gavigan, along with Dana Syracuse, who's a very high profile lawyer in the space around compliance, and then the head of compliance at Gemini. They were talking about this exact thing, right? So where compliance and privacy-focused technologies really cross. And this was in response to Gemini, the exchange, regulated under NYDFS up in New York. They enabled private withdrawals from a Gemini exchange, and that caught a lot of people off guard because of this exact misunderstanding, where it's like, just because it's private doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. In fact, in a lot of cases, even in traditional finance, privacy is a necessity for somebody to be compliant in the first place. Right. So it's really like changing that narrative. And I would encourage anybody who's really deeply interested in the compliance side. I'm not going to talk about it too deeply just because I'm not really deep into the compliance. That live stream, which is on the ECC YouTube channel, it recorded, go watch it. It was an incredible conversation coming out of it. All I thought was anybody that's involved in the cryptocurrency space who's really interested in privacy technology and how it fits into the future, they need to watch that conversation, because that conversation really laid out the foundation of how we think about cash going forward. And yeah, I mean, in terms of the regulatory work we do, there's different approaches to how somebody would tackle privacy, right? And how you would tackle perceptions of privacy. We took the tack of, we want to work really, really closely with regulators to educate them, to help them understand why it's important for consumers to have their privacy being protected, and then also help them craft regulation and legislation that is user-centric, right? We want the consumer to benefit from this. The other tack is to say that it's going around regulation. That's not at all what we want to do, right? We want this to be a model for how we can perpetuate user-focused and individual liberty-focused technologies going into the future.
Yeah, and I think
You mentioned travel rule in there. That's an interesting part. We can, like, I'd love to dig in a little bit here into some of the specific features of Zcash, and I think travel rule kind of hinges us into that a little bit.
Yeah, and I think what the last thing you said is really important, because it's very American in that sense. Focusing on freedom, right? Focusing on this idea of, and I think that's awesome, because one of the reasons I got so excited about cryptocurrency, over 10 years ago, was the idea that it was open, it was free, it was empowering. If you had any questions about it, you wanted to challenge it, and many great computer scientists, I remember Dan Kaminsky, well-known cryptographer, said, this could be broken, and then sure enough, if you can't beat him, join him. He joined the board of Stellar, right? And and I think that's awesome. That's so exciting and empowering. And I really want to drive this home in this stream, that for people that are watching, when you're talking about Zcash, you're talking about privacy coins. There is a path to compliance. There is a real element of user safety and creating better systems than we had with the bank, right? Better systems than we had with centralized finance. And to go all the way from carbon copy, credit, debit cards, plastic cards, to PCI compliance, online e-commerce, online payments, and going even a step further into digital payments like Apple Wallet, touchless, tap to pay, Apple Wallet, Google G Wallet, GPay. That's the next frontier is utilizing the blockchain, and giving user privacy and safety, I think, is such a huge part, because this is kind of like the big final frontier of Web3 that's missing. And I see it all the time. People are talking about, smart contracts, dApps, all these things are very cool, but where's the privacy, right? So we're still kind of lagging behind. And yeah, I think it would be really cool if you touched on travel rule, because travel rule is, in many ways, the technology eclipsed the regulators, right? It's moving so quickly that it's hard as a regulator to get a grasp of what are these different types of assets, how do we regulate them. And so for our viewers that don't know, about 2 years ago, about a year and a half ago, a group called the Financial Action Task Force met in Vienna to discuss a new proposal called the travel rule. And the travel rule is basically saying that we need some sort of system to monitor transactions between exchanges, or what we call VASPs, or virtual asset service providers. And if you're crossing the border, you may have seen this, or when you leave the country and you're coming back in and you're coming across the border, you may see this sign: if you have over 10,000 US dollars of dollars or financial instruments or money or whatever, you have to declare it, right? And so this ties into the travel rule. How do we know, as people are moving from country to country, from application to application, how do we know that we've remained compliant with those regulations? And Brad, tell us about how Zcash works with travel rule.
Yeah, so to touch on the foundations of travel rule, I mean, it was a ruling that was put in place years before modern cryptocurrency was a thing. There's this thing called the Banking Secrecy Act, and in it there's colloquially known as the travel rule, and what it laid out, again, not being a compliance lawyer, but at a base understanding, what it laid out was a requirement for transfers between institutions, like traditional banking institutions, a requirement for those transactions between those institutions to have information about the transaction itself included with that movement of funds, right? So if one bank wired money to another bank, there needed to be information included in that transmission about the institutions it was coming from, the account number and bank customer that it was involved with. What you're referring to a couple of years ago is FATF recommended that be extended to cryptocurrencies, that same travel rule. So really what that means is say an exchange between like the VASPs, like you're talking about on the exchanges, those transfers of crypto need to have information that travels along with it. That's really hard for some cryptocurrencies. There's really, it would have to be secondary systems. again, our head of compliance was very forward-looking and recommended before Zcash was even launched in 2016 that we include a feature called the memo field in our shielded transactions. And on its surface, this seems like a really simple thing. This memo field is a 512 byte kind of blank text field that can be filled up with anything. But the reasoning behind it originally was that this space is eventually, and again, this was 2016, so this was very, very ahead of its time. Eventually, we're going to have to satisfy travel rule in the cryptocurrency space. And this space, this memo field in the Zcash shielded transaction, is a perfect place for that to go. So, I mean, we've been way ahead of this, way before that ruling happened. So, in that way, there is this avenue and this capability within the currency itself to be travel rule compliant, if the actual exchanges satisfy that travel rule requirement using the memo field there. It's kind of some of the very thoughtful approach that we've taken with a lot of the aspects of Zcash.
That's really cool, and I think that it's really interesting because not many blockchains have really put this this kind of thought into this. Even as this is developing, it's really been more of a blockchain analytics, transaction monitoring, like a chain analysis, elliptic kind of discussion. And I think the really big thing is that we need to have this discussion at the core protocol level, and that's really interesting that you guys are doing that, because that's not something that really previously has been done. And there's a lot of proposed solutions, but I think it's, in my opinion, it's really up to the blockchains themselves and the core devs to think about these things and to inform regulators, inform the public, like, this is what's possible and this is how we do it, right?
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
we can't, yeah, there are so many different blockchains, whether they're proof of work, proof of stake, delegated proof of stake, distributed ledger, different types of consensus. They all need to be taking into account these aspects, including decentralized identity and things like that. And we're really at the very beginning, the very cusp of that. And I think that it's just very cool, because you guys are at the line, right, of consumer safety, consumer privacy, but then also how do we comply? How do we do this balancing act and do both? And you guys are doing it really well. It's really exciting.
Yeah, I mean, what we found is regulators generally just want to protect their constituency, like whoever that is, right? So if they're a non-elected regulator, they're some appointed regulator, their task is still to protect the people that they're regulating. They're not out here trying to crush innovation. That's not at all. And I think the disconnect usually happens from a place of misunderstanding more than anything. So we find it to be our job and an ongoing job to make sure that regulators understand what we're trying to create, and that also feeds back to us to figure out what we're going to make going forward, right? So, the forward-looking part of the memo field to satisfy travel rule, that's one aspect, but it all feeds into kind of this iterative cycle of creating Zcash, which leads into kind of some unique governance structures around Zcash, which I would love to talk about, especially some of the upgrades coming up soon, and kind of how that feeds into these ongoing efforts around regulation and outreach.
Yeah, and so that, I guess that brings us to the next topic, which is Canopy, and it's very exciting. I also want to touch on something before we get to that, which is Zcash. Something that came up recently that we saw was many blockchains were designed, like let's look at Litecoin, right? Like one of the very early coins, fork of Bitcoin, looking at this idea of Austrian economics, and that at some point you have this hard cap that kind of runs out. And how does the dev team continue to fund themselves? Does it become purely a FOSS-free and open source software movement? And is that enough to keep the innovation moving and things going? And so something that I thought was very novel, and it was the first time I had ever seen it done in crypto before, was the founders reward from the founders reward from the block, or from the I don't know if you guys call it in Zcash Coinbase, but it's funny how they adopted that name. So I'm not talking about Coinbase the company, I'm talking about the block
Coinbase
reward.
lowercase c.
Yes, with the lowercase c. So from the block reward, you guys pioneered the founders reward, which was really cool because some people are skeptical. And I remember in 2016, there were hardcore crypto people. They can't do this, Well, turns out you can, and turns out, many years later, and not to knock, Litecoin or anything. I love Litecoin. I love Charlie Lee and all the work he's done and some other projects. But you had Bitcoin Cash and you had Litecoin saying, we want founders rewards now, right? And this makes sense because we see, you guys took the risk, right? Of maybe, community saying that's not how it's done. And yeah, a few people spoke up, but at the end of the day, that founders reward powered amazing developments, not only on the chain itself, but I would say in academia as well, in terms of cryptography.
Absolutely.
And tell us a little bit about Canopy and how that worked today and how you've transitioned that into a newer model, which I heard this saying out there, exit to community, where some coins, that's where like the founders reward runs out, but the community is so strong that it continues to build in this free and open source software environment. And tell us how you have kind of transitioned from this 10% founders reward that originally went to founders and now has expanded to cover Electric Coin Company, Zcash Foundation, and I'll let you speak on it.
Definitely. So a little bit more background on Founders Reward. When we launched, it was decided to create this allocation from the mining reward to go to forward-looking development efforts. Originally, it was called the Founders Reward that led to the creation of the Electric Coin Company, the organization I work for, and then later, very soon thereafter, a 501c3 by the name of Zcash Foundation, which are two unique entities. I mean, the thinking was, it's pretty, like you said, like the crypto community said, hey, that's not how you do it. That's just not the way it should happen. Our perspective was very different, that without constant funding, development, broadening that base of people that were directly invested and incentivized to work on it and improve it, it was going to be very hard to create a sustainable ecosystem with like a 10, 20, 30-year view. So it's very easy to take a short-term view if the funding is non-existent. It's very hard to take a long-term view. So the Founders Reward was set for 4 years, which from the launch in October 2016 until the first halving, which is upcoming in mid-November of this year. So we're, about 8 weeks away? Oh, 4 weeks away, man. So that was the Founders Reward. At the beginning of this year, and even late last year, we started looking at how we could continue to broaden the community. And then discussions started to happen in the community itself about how we can fund new development efforts and expand who is actually developing the Zcash ecosystem. And that's interesting. You said exit to community. I actually haven't heard that, but I love that saying, right? So what's happening with Canopy, right? We nickname all of our network upgrades. Canopy is the first one that will be post-halving, and it includes a new issuance schedule of coins to 3 entities. So the Electric Coin Company will continue to receive funds at a reduced rate of what we receive now. Zcash Foundation will continue to receive some funds. And then this is actually the really exciting part, right? So we're going to continue to do the academic development and core development on Zcash. And we'll touch on a few of the things that we've rolled out in the last couple of years. But the really interesting thing out of this is that the community voted for 8% of the issuance to go to a new entity called the Major Grants Fund. And there's a couple stipulations on major grant funds, one of which is that the Electric Coin Company, so the company I work for, cannot apply for these funds. And that was completely 100% intentional, right? We're trying to expand the scope. And so what does that equal? Like 8% issuance. What it means is that motivated development teams that really want to advance the state of the art in privacy and cryptocurrency has a fund now to go apply for of somewhere in the order of about $30 million at current Zcash valuation over the next 4 years.
Don't you think that's too small?
30 million? I don't know. I got to pump those numbers up.
It's incredible.
Yeah, and I mean, this is for Zcash development. This is for general privacy technology. This is to really put these technologies in people's hands. And when I say we have to take like a 10, 20, 30-year view of these kind of technologies, I mean, I think this is one of the ways we do it, right? It's difficult to do with some other projects that have done like pre-mines because incentives get misaligned. There's just too much money up front, and it's very hard to maintain momentum. And it's hard to do when it's like a single entity. So at every step of the way, it's been our intention to continue to broaden this community and fund them appropriately to make sure that it can happen. And the other cool part about this, it was a completely community-driven effort, right? This was put up for community vote. And as far as I know, even in the voting, there were only a handful of ECC employees that were even allowed to vote in that. So it was a 100% community-driven choice to fund things in this way. And for me, it's super exciting because that just means there's going to be more teams, more differences of thought and opinion, and those negotiations that'll create very interesting things in the future.
Yeah, I think it's incredible because, one thing that got me really excited about the cryptocurrency, about Bitcoin, and, going into the future, from the early days, from Bitcoin talk, from, there were no exchanges, to to going into 2017, where there was all this excitement that, wait, you're telling me there's other things than Bitcoin, which was kind of like the 2017, wake up call, and people started noticing Zcash. I remember when Brian Kelly got on CNBC and he had Zcash on the chart. There was metal, there was Zcash on there, and he was giving the breakdown of the most interesting coins. And I will say that list, that chart, did have the most interesting coins. I had a big sliver there for Zcash, and I think one of the reasons why Brian chose these projects is because on that pie chart, and you can, if you go on Google Images, I'm sure you can find that pie chart out there, Brian Kelly
Right.
pie chart, CNBC Fast Money. But it was really cool because all those projects were really focused on community development, bounties, involving the community in a big way. Everything that I saw in that presentation was really focused on that. And I remember, when you guys first launched, that was a big focus of bringing the community in. And I think that the most successful blockchains, the most successful projects have really leveraged the community. And that that is something that I see today. And to kind of point at Uniswap for a second, Uniswap was is a DEX on Ethereum that kind of out of nowhere exploded. Why did Uniswap explode over the past couple months? And I have a theory on it. I think that it's because of the community, the automated market maker. You're allowing people to now participate in the profits of the exchange that they never could before, right? And that's very exciting. And in the world of development and things like that, it's not only sharing in ownership of this decentralized autonomous entity or business, or what they were calling DAC, which I think is becoming a real thing now, but also this that concept that I said of exit to community, which is like, that's incredible. When this thing kind of it really does become autonomous at that point, it spreads its wings,
Right.
and all the community comes underneath you. And like I said, the blockchains that have really survived, the projects that have really survived, have really taken that into account. And I think that it's our job as financial services companies in digital asset space to educate, to bring the community in, and to create a very different mentality than what existed with pre-existing finance, which was very closed, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
this idea of having a kind of an open forum where anybody can contribute is clearly the future. And so, and for our viewers, that 30 million, I made a joke and said, isn't that kind of small? It's huge. It's massive, right? When was the last time you heard of any fintech company say, we've got a $30 million grant? I could think of the largest IPO tech payment tech companies and banks, not IPO banks, but think of the largest IPO tech companies, and I won't name names, like I was gonna say shapes, but there's a shape for every payment tech company. But yeah, so like Triangle or whatever, right? Like, are they going out and giving a $30 million bounty? I don't think so. And the really cool part about that is it's autonomous, it's powered by itself. So the community is voting to do this, giving the market liquidity. They're using the coin, they're using the blockchain, they're building on top of it, and it really grows on its own. It's
Nice.
So incredible because it is like a plant in a sense that you put a seed in the ground, and the seed is, I have an idea, it's called Zcash, right? And it grew into this amazing tree that is bearing fruit continually for its users and for the community. And that's it's just incredible to see it happening.
And that long view, especially, like that's one of the reasons that I really appreciate. I work for ECC, but in my own opinion, I really appreciate where the project's going, just because we are able to take that long-term view, because our community has that foresight, and I can see that the foundation and the company both have that kind of long-term view. In my mind, coming from more traditional backgrounds, it's really hard to operate on like a short vision, right? You're just kind of reactive at that point. These kind of funds and this split of funding and this long-term funding, and by, you know, the graciousness of the community to keep funding our development efforts, that just really extends that runway to see what we can do, you know, 5 and more years from now. And I think that's what it's going to take. I mean, let's face it, cryptocurrency is what, 10 years old, right? A little more. That's not very old. It's just not very old, right? This is a lot of very intelligent people working on the same problems, but it still just takes time. You know, it just takes a lot of time, and it takes being able to make bets that will take multiple years to pay off, right? And without doing that, I think that projects that don't have that kind of long-term funding are going to struggle to really start solving the problems of many years from now. So I'm really excited that MGRC is going to be able to focus on some of those long-term problems, and that we're going to continue to be able to do that at ECC. So
it's very cool. And yeah, it's interesting to see, because, you know, in the world of crypto, from a computer science background, it's really interesting, because traditionally engineers kind of, you know, applied to one company. There's, you know, IBM, there's one, you know, kind of ethos. Back in the day, IBM had colored shirts. It was very, you know, and then you flash forward to today, and it is such a different world, right? It's a brave new world where it's you think you can break it, hack it. You want to build something on it, here's a bounty. You're on the other side of the world, you want to participate in this, jump in. It's the complete opposite of how tech started. And I think that it's incredible, because it's growing on its own, and it's hardening itself. So if you're a cryptographer and you think you can break it, try to break it. If you're an entrepreneur and you want to build a business around it, and you want to build, you know, a merchant platform, or you want to build a document signing tool or something like that, or whatever it might be, you know, go after these bounties, go and you know, build on them. And then also in the world of academia, it's very cool to see, you know, for many of us, you know, when we left, you know, undergrad and graduate and doctoral programs, you know, 10 plus years ago, you know, there was no blockchain initiative at your local university. And now, look at us now, right? I think it's really cool, because it is becoming a whole industry in and of itself. And it took a very long time for regulators to kind of take a view of, hey, we should define this at the federal level. International regulators should meet internationally, like the travel rule, and coming together. And I can remember a time, I think it was maybe like 2012, where I think it was the IRS, or I think it was the IRS said, you know, we view Bitcoin as the same as stamp collecting and philology, you know, and then it's like, wait, we could tax it more. Never mind, take that back, right? But you know, it's really interesting to see the regulations evolve with the technology. And I think, you know, good blockchains, good projects are very open-minded to that, like Zcash, like Metal, like Proton. We're getting out there. We're really building a lot of tools around this, trying to make it easier for people to use. And, you know, the end goal is not some anarchist utopia. And I think that some people, you know, get that confused, because they think, well, this could empower crypto anarchy. And yes, a lot of the early Bitcoin and cypherpunk ideals sprung out of this crypto anarchist ideal. And I think it's very cool. But at the end of the day, we live in the real world, and we have to build tools for the internet that is valuable for everyone, for you know, for our grandparents, for our little, for our sons and our daughters, for our younger cousin, right? For everyone should be able to use this stuff. And it's really kind of getting to a place where we can start to do that. And I think that with tools like Zcash, it's kind of the beginning of understanding it doesn't all have to be publicly out there for everyone to see. And another thing that's interesting too is that Zcash, you can't really see, you know, you can't really see the total amount of coins on the blockchain, right? I think that's, well, can you maybe touch on that a little bit on the blockchain?
Yeah.
What can you see today, and what can you, because I don't want to misspeak, but what can you see on the chain today in terms of stats? And how do you verify that? Like, for example, we were talking about wrapped coins earlier, and I saw that I think it was like Link partnered with BitGo to do like a proof of reserves. Do you guys have any plans to do things like that? And what can you see today on the blockchain, Zcash blockchain, for our viewers that are not familiar with Zcash? Like, what is visible from the outside?
Right. So maybe let's just do a Zcash primer for everybody. We'll start from like foundational aspects, and
Yeah.
that'll actually
Yes, please.
that'll let me
I
talk
think it's
about some of the
awesome.
stuff I'm working on day to day too, which I'm like itching to talk about. So
Great.
so Zcash we launched in 2016. We forked the Bitcoin code base with its basic UTXO model, and your basic Bitcoin address. We changed the native Bitcoin address to something that we call a transparent address. It behaves almost identically to Bitcoin with a couple small differences. None of that's terribly interesting, except for the fact that it made us very compatible with some existing technologies. What we added in the interesting part of Zcash is what we call Z addresses. So we created a system in Zcash where it's one chain, one asset, but it exists with two different addresses that are compatible with each other. I mean, you can send money back and forth between the different kinds of addresses. Those Z addresses are the shielded or private ecosystem. With those Z addresses, using a technology called zero knowledge proofs, ZK snarks, we can create transactions where the general public can still download a node and verify that transactions are valid, but they do not know. So all the individual participants, including everybody, right? This is fully decentralized system. Each individual participant not involved in a transaction with Z addresses can verify that it's true and that the amount is valid and all those kind of things, but they never learn the sender's address, the recipient's address, or the amount that was actually sent. And that's kind of the magic behind the zero knowledge proofs, right? So you can prove that the statement is true, but without knowing all the details of the statement itself. And that was like the big breakthrough, right? That's what pioneered and launched Zcash in the first place. When we launched in 2016, it was very proof of concept. It was a little slow, like we called it sapling at that point, or sprout. And it was slow, and it was like very academic. It was like the first major implementation. Yeah, it was the first major implementation of zero knowledge proofs in the wild. And a lot of people, like a lot of academics, were like, "Hey, this is awesome. This is out here. It's actually getting stress tested." But it was slow, right? So we immediately set out to make them better. Over the following 2 years, our cryptographers developed a system called Sapling, which we deployed in 2018 in October. It was right at the 2-year anniversary. And Sapling made all of the same guarantees about privacy, where everybody can verify the transaction, but they can't see the sender, recipient, or amount. But it made it, at this point it's a couple years on, but it was multiple orders of magnitude faster than what Sprout was. And that gave us a lot of really cool options, right? Before, it was like you're running a full node on your computer, and it was fun, but now we've created a system that can pretty much exist on any phone in anybody's pocket. And these privacy guarantees are the strongest of any cryptocurrency in existence today, right? Your anonymity set, if you will, like the number of people that could possibly be involved in that shielded transaction, is the entirety of everyone who's ever interacted with the shielded pool, right? So it continues to grow the more that people use it, and it's a substantial amount of privacy provided by Zcash. So and then, like, there's some more details, I guess, about the shielded transactions themselves. We can talk about the sender and recipient and what they see. As a sender, I'm going to create a transaction. I know the recipient's address. Obviously, I'm going to send it to them. So I know my address, I know the amount, and I know the recipient's address. The recipient of the transaction, they obviously know the amount, but they don't even get to see the sender necessarily, right? So the thing that we have that memo field included, where you can include information about the transactions themselves, but the degrees of privacy at every step and every like level of the system is incredibly robust.
I think that's really cool for our viewers to know that you can't see the amount, and I think that alone is such a huge breakthrough, that you could pay this invoice, I can give you proof of receipt, but I can't see the amount. That's huge. That was what I was trying to get at earlier.
Right.
And yeah, that is something that I think was a first in the world of cryptocurrency, right? We had never seen that before, and I remember being in 2016 being so excited for that, and then to flash forward from watching the slow start mining on Poloniex to It's a completely different world, right?
Right.
In terms of exchanges, in terms of apps, in terms of everything. And now we're really getting to, and I'd like to open it up for questions. Now we're getting to this world of PayPal with crypto, right?
Right.
Zcash on MetalPay, Zcash in PayPal or other apps.
See, now we're talking about what I'm actually working on day to day. I've been itching. I've been waiting to talk about it. So one of the reasons I wanted to do this with you guys, I've used Metal. I've looked at it. You all have one of the best user experiences, and your user interface is one of the best in the entire crypto space, right? And I view what you all are doing as absolutely critical for like bridging that last mile between these protocols, which are, we can describe them all day long. At the end of the day, 99% of people aren't really going to care what the protocols are doing. They just care about what like the guarantees are. That bridging that last mile is really one of the most critical things that we have to do. So my team at ECC, we're creating what we're calling our mobile wallet libraries. So one of the reasons I was excited to come on here is I see a ton of alignment between what you guys are doing with your incredible user experience, delivering it to your users, and what we're doing in creating these SDKs for mobile, for Android, for iOS, to bring these privacy guarantees to your pocket, right? It's like we have a great design team, and we're creating like examples of how we'd implement the tech. But right now, we really want to just kind of bridge that last mile and have people using these SDKs. So, I think there's a ton of alignment in what we're doing. So it's been, I'm hoping we can get to a point in the near future where Metal users are using Z-address Zcash.
Oh, we're working towards it. We're going to get there very soon. And I'm just so excited. There are several topics that, in early crypto before smart contracts are really a thing. And those two areas that were really exciting for me that have proven to be some of the most interesting areas, and also something that the banks are really looking at is privacy on chain and stable coins. And those really tie into this digital wallet experience of the future. And I think it's incredible to see it come from the early launch to sapling to now today. I frequently post about all different types of cryptocurrencies. And when I post about Zcash, I always find it interesting because there are just so many people that are from all different areas, from like the most heavy computer science background to no computer science background, because it has this concept of anonymity. And like I said in the very beginning, I know it sounds cheesy, but it's very American. It's very pro freedom, right? The ability to transact without people knowing who you're transacting with. That's such an empowering idea. And it's just very interesting to see so many people looking at it. I think that, flash forward another 5 or 10 years, people will be using this stuff every single day. Many people already are, but it's still in this early phase where it's about to really explode. And when I think people really realize the power of each one of these chains, and specifically around Zcash, this anonymity piece, it's going to become more and more important in an increasingly not private world, right?
Yes, that's absolutely right. I think I'll paraphrase. I think Edward Snowden said something along the lines of saying that you don't need privacy because you don't have anything to hide is like saying that you don't need freedom of speech because you don't have anything to say, right? Like privacy into the future is it's a human right. We should have the right to disclose the pieces about ourselves and our actions that we want, right? So I'm really excited about the future of Zcash and really excited to get it into people's hands.
And I always say encrypt everything, including your grocery list. Encrypt all the things, right? You never know when you want the privacy. And I think that one of the biggest things one of the things that you want the most privacy around is your finance, right? And so at Metal, we take that very seriously. We have a really strong customer safety, consumer privacy, but going all the way from just like the simple app to the blockchains that we support, we really value technologies like Zcash because that's the bridge, right? From the application to Web3, that's the connection. I think Andre was going to come in with some thoughts.
Hey guys. Awesome conversation. Really on the edge of my seat for a lot of that. So yeah, thank you for doing this. I have a couple of questions here from the audience. I wanted to make sure we saved a little bit of time for. We have about 10 minutes left, so we'll probably try to give each of you at least one question. The first one is for you, Brad. In your wildest dreams, how will Zcash impact the world?
Man, going right in, that's a big one. That's a broad question. How will Zcash impact the world? You know, I see a world right now where increasingly, and even before I joined Zcash years ago, I had almost gotten to a point where I'd given up on my privacy be even existing in like an increasingly connected world, right? It was almost like a sense of resignation. And when I joined Zcash, it started to go the other way entirely. It said that, you know, not only are there avenues where people can protect their privacy, not be exploited online, right? Not have all of their information included in every major hack that hits the news every 3 months, but like there's a likelihood that we can make this happen. So, you know, when I look at Zcash in the scope of like, you know, 10 or 20 years, I think the foundational technology behind Zcash and even the currency itself could be how modern and like future currencies are modeled. You know, I know that's kind of a broad answer, but I mean, the fact is, if we're building anything, we're building the foundational privacy technology that should power the future to prevent people from literally seeing their name pop up every 6 weeks in some major hack, right? That's just not normal. It's being normalized, but it shouldn't be normal. I think working on those technologies and making that future feel a lot different. You know, I think that's really what the future of Zcash is about.
Yeah, amazing. And one more follow-up question for you based off of some of the things that you've said, because you mentioned MGRC specifically and this pool of funding that is available for Zcash developers. When you look around the ecosystem, what needs funding? What do you want to see people going out and building that really gets you excited?
Oh man, you know, there's a bunch. So like, I almost take this as like a multiple year tier, right? So in the near term, obviously we're working on it at ECC for mobile wallets, but in the near term, I want to get shielded Zcash in everybody's hands. Right now, a lot of Zcash is that transparent Zcash, which is really like a compatibility layer, right? You know, I want to see shielded Zcash be the norm across all of the different wallets. You know, I want to see it in Metal Pay. I want to see it in all the wallets, right?
We're working on it.
I know. I think that would be like the first step. That would be the closest thing. I think the thing following that would be in-person and e-commerce solutions, to where the unique features of Zcash, like the memo field, can be used as an actual e-commerce layer to almost avoid, honestly, in a sense, the requirements like PCI compliance and like data safety. I mean, you see the big hacks, but you also see people just getting their credit card number stolen, right? And that's
no
just
more
because
data breaches.
Just general data breaches, right? So, you know, every time you enter your credit card on some website, who knows, maybe tomorrow you got a bunch of false charges. Again, that's not normal. It's been normalized, but it's just not normal. It shouldn't be. So I think that's like that medium term step. And then long term, you know, I would love to see academic research coming from MGRC. I mean, we do a lot of it at ECC, but, you know, frankly, there's a future where this stuff should be instant, right? It shouldn't just take a few seconds. It should be instant. We should have instant finality. You know, we should have these transactions feeling as fast and as simple as a credit card, but you're still data sovereign. You're still protecting your privacy. I think there's a lot of different horizons with which the MGRC can fund projects.
Amazing. Okay, Marshall, I have a couple here for you. I gave Brad two, so I'll give you two as well. The first one is quick. We must have people in the audience coming from the India community. Does MetalPay have any plans for MetalX Exchange to launch in India?
Yes, we do. And really the whole Metal platform. So not just MetalX, but MetalPay as well, and future products. We see India as a huge potential for digital currency. I think it was only a few years ago I saw that the Indian government had outlawed, I believe, large bills for money laundering worries, right? And you know, when you think about that, I think that blockchain provides the best opportunity we've ever had for track and trace, and something that we've been working on at Metal, something called Proton blockchain, that we see is very synergistic with Zcash and other blockchains as well. And the ability for that to empower remittances and cross-border payments. So the ability for someone in India to request a payment from another country from somebody's debit card over the blockchain. India has one of the largest populations in the world. There are tons, and that means tons of devs, tons of people that are interested in this space and are building on top of it. And we really want to bring this technology to India because we think that it can really open up borders. We think that it can change remittances. We think that it can provide economic opportunities. One of the things that I think has been kind of tough is that, like I mentioned earlier in the conversation, is regulation catching up with technology. And it's really the duty of people in this space, not only academics, but entrepreneurs, researchers, engineers, designers, legal, finance, everybody, to get up and to speak in the regulatory sphere and to talk about these technologies and explain like what we're explaining right now. It's not just about privacy for the sake of privacy. It's about privacy for financial freedom, privacy for consumer safety, and we can also stay compliant. So I think that there's a huge opportunity in India, and it really seems like it's kind of starting to open back up. It kind of tightened down for a minute. It's about to open back up. One thing that I definitely see happening, and we just saw happen in China, is the central bank digital currencies, the CBDCs. And that is an inevitability in India. It's already happened in China, was piloting in Shenzhen a few days ago. It's happening in the US. The Federal Reserve is having the discussion with Treasury. We're talking about it in Congress where, it's really expanding. And so I think that the opportunity to replace cash on the privacy side with Zcash and MetalPay, using technologies like Proton to build apps that can touch legacy financial system with just a few lines of code, and not this huge walled garden of, oh, you want to touch the bank? Okay, you can't touch the bank because you don't have the credentials, you don't have the permission. But that was the beautiful thing about cryptocurrency. And not to get off topic, but one of the things I loved about seeing, for example, like Dogecoin, it kept it light, it kept it fun. What is it? It's a dog on a coin. Let's build some apps. Same thing. Zcash, same thing. You want to build privacy apps. You want to get involved with some of the best cryptographers in the world who are previously in the sphere of academia. Now they are breaking into this open financial system, and anybody can join. It's incredible. And so I see that as just the funnel right into India is the exit to community. It doesn't have to be an exit, but opening it up to the community. And India has so many people that are so interested in this. And we have lots of community members from India that are very, very excited to be involved. So we are planning it. Yeah. Regulation pending.
Yeah, absolutely. Huge population there, large developer community. It's probably a big untapped opportunity for cryptocurrency in India as a whole. One more question for you before we start to wrap up here, because you mentioned Proton briefly as you were talking, and one of the questions came in around how you're planning to work with other coins and wrap other coins. Can you maybe talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So Proton blockchain is really cool. For those that don't know, it is a delegated proof of stake system. It is about up to 5,000 transactions per second. And what's really interesting about it is that you can have a human readable @ name. So I can register as @Marshall, although somebody got a Marshall before I could grab it. But I have a few good names. And we're also building out the infrastructure for decentralized identity on the core protocol, as well as the ability to link fiat funding sources. So this is something that's never been done before, and a lot of this is operations and how you plug it in as a processor, as a bank. But what's really cool is we're attacking from the fintech side first. Instead of saying we're going to change the bank and the bank is going to install the software in the back end, yeah, that's going to take a long time. So we're attacking the fintech layer and saying, here is a open source technology that could allow you to process payments for credit and debit over cards, credit and debit over ACH, IBAN, SEPA, existing banking Rails protocol. And now you could write an app that could simply pull a payment from a linked fiat funding source. So that could be a dApp. On Proton, all the smart contracts are in C++, very well-known, popularized language globally. And that is such a cool concept to say that now we can interact with the legacy financial system without all of these approvals. We've changed the methodology in which what we call the processors or the money service businesses, they're kind of like these anchors into the network to allow this. and MetalPay is one of them. And hopefully into the future, we'll see, PayPal's and Coinbase's and Square's and all types of different industries integrating this. And I see that as an inevitability. Same thing for Zcash. But that is really kind of one of the big final frontiers. And so wrapping coins is something that we launched recently on blocks.io, BLOKS.io. If you go to proton.blocks.io, you can wrap Ethereum ERC20 coins, and they become 0 fees, instant transfer. You can send it to a human readable at name. And pretty soon they will also begin to bear interest as well, as something that we're exploring. So wrapping those coins, you could have XZEC. It's going at 3,000 transactions per second. I can send it to @Brad. It's super cool. I could request some XZEC from your debit card in India or send to India, right? Very cool. And let's say I want to get to shielded addresses, boom, unwrap, shielded addresses, mainnet core functionality of the blockchain. It's really kind of an interoperable, it's not too different from kind of Cosmos, but attacking from a different direction, focus on fiat funding sources and decentralized identity, and very compatible with Zcash. I saw some questions in here. When 0 fees ZEC on MetalPay? Well, it's already 0 fees on ZEC on MetalPay if you send it inside the app, but pretty soon we'll have wrapped ZEC as well. And so 0 fees ZEC on chain to human at names, and then unwrapping to shielded addresses and privacy. Very cool stuff.
That's amazing. I definitely have to go and get at Andre before somebody else hops in there and takes it.
I'm registering it right now.
All right, awesome. This has been great, guys. So really appreciate your time. We'll definitely be in touch. You can find the recording up on YouTube. And yeah, thanks again.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Cheers.
Thanks, Marshall.
Cheers.
Thanks, guys. This is awesome. Very, very cool. Yeah, I was talking about. Are we offline?
I think we're still live. It looks like we're still live on YouTube.